Opening up the notes, Tarak saw not words on a page, but rather experiences. As he studied the documents before him, he did not simply read ink on parchment, but rather he found himself flush with the page, as if the mere act of reading the celestial documents before him was enough to draw him out of his own body and into the body of the person that he was reading about. You felt yourself growing up on the streets of Old Cheliax. The year is 4513. You are an orphan. Your parents are dead. You must steal to survive, and you hate it. You do not steal from the needy, however. You fancy yourself a bit of a rebel. You only steal from those who can afford to lose. You're no Robin Hood, but you learn that Mage Hand is really handy when it comes to survival. You become smart. You enjoy reading and spellcraft. You consider learning how to pick locks in order to better yourself, but you decide against it. You think that's morally wrong. And you try to live a just life, even if that makes life harder. You feel your body hating you and your stomach groaning when you give up easy to grab food for the sake of morality. As a result, you decide to move away from Cheliax, and you find yourself on a boat to Sothis. There are a lot of people on this boat, not just other humans, but weird races as well. You've never met non-humans before. It scares you. Once in Sothis, you find it similar to Cheliax, just more sandy. You spend about a week here before you bump into Mom. At first, you're not entirely sure who this woman is when you first meet her, but your mind only acknowledges her as Mom. She was an elf. That was weird. She was tall, smart, and when you stole from her, she didn't mind. Very weird. One time, when you were hiding away, Mom came to you. She handed you food and spoke to you. You don't understand this feeling. This is not how people normally talk to you. Normally they hit, or they shoo you away. Not this elf. Not Mom. Mom is nice. She gives you food. She talks with you. She buys you blankets. She gives you good food. Mom is weird and awesome. She touches you. You're not used to people touching you. You don't know how to react. You cry. Your mom hugs you. You hug her back. She tells you that she loves you, and you love Mom. Life makes sense now. You realize what you've been missing out on. From now, you have love. You have family. It's your 8th birthday today, and Mom has a surprise for you. She's going to adopt you. You're unfamiliar with the concept. Mom explains that she's an adventurer. She wants to take you with her to learn magic. She will feed you, love you, and care for you. And in return, she wants to teach you magic. You are, understandably, ecstatic at the concept. You love magic. You love Mom. This is a dream come true for you. You begin traveling with Mom. Mom is a wizard. You lived with her for many years. She owns a magical item store, but she's also an adventurer. She tells you crazy stories of her exploits, and you love to hear them. She tells you one day you might get a chance to come with her, and sooner or later, that day comes. You were just practicing a basic mage armor spell when the good news came. Mom was headed out to the tomb of Pharaoh Sekhet Pa-Mafir III, out in the sandy deserts, with some other people. You remember a frogman and 2 humans. One of the humans wore the holy symbol of Sarenrae. Sarenrae. That seems important. The tomb was full of dangers, though. Plenty of traps and undead monsters. But the heroes fought through them. Mom protected you with her spells. She cast a mage armor on you, and you were even able to take out a skeleton with your sling. The frog opened a big stone door, inside of which were massive wooden boats. And inside the boats were scarab swarms. They swarmed all over the humans and the frog. Thinking fast, Mom pulled out a scroll, and she summoned a flaming sphere, burning all the insects and the wooden boats. Mom smiled at her accomplishment, but her smile turned to fear. You looked over at the boats. The boats were on fire. Mom dismissed the spell, but it was too late. You ready a ray of frost to put out the fire. There's a big crash. The old wooden rod of the boat collapses on top of the frogman. Mom looks horrified. You yell for the cleric. She will save the frogman. Instead, the cleric of Sarenrae runs over to Mom and begins yelling at her. She uses words like murderer and killer and reckless. Mom tries to defend herself. She uses a lot of words. The cleric of Sarenrae also uses a lot of words. The two of them begin shouting at each other. A lot of words go back and forth. You can't remember any of them because of what happened next. You looked over, and you saw the cleric of Sarenrae heft her heavy mace and swung it at Mom. The mace connected with the base of Mom's face. It pierced Mom's skin, and the mace kept going. It was hard. It broke Mom's cheekbone. It hit Mom's spinal column. You froze. You could not move. Your brain just moved super fast. You had studied medicine. You knew exactly what was happening in front of you. But you were powerless to stop it. The mace pierced Mom's neck. She was going to be paralyzed from the neck down. It fractured her vertebrae. She was never going to walk again. But the mace kept going all the way across the neck. And the mace kept going all the way out the other side of the neck. Mom's head toppled off of her body with all the fanfare of a nutcracker. Her skull impacted the floor, and her body slumped down next to you. The cleric looked at Mom with disdain. She said a few choice words of contempt. You do not remember those words. All you remember is the cleric's gaze falling upon you. "The brat!" called out the cleric. Adrenaline filled your legs. You ran. You ran as fast as your legs could take you. Past Mom, past the cleric, past the other human who swung a scimitar to stop you. Scimitar. You would remember that. You ran towards the entrance. You saw the light of the sun. Freedom! Until you felt pain in your back. Something had hit you. Arrow? Crossbow bolt? You don't know. You heard the cleric of Sarenrae yell, "Shoot her again! Don't let her escape!" With pain in your body, you rushed out into the sand, just as a second crossbow bolt pierced your leg. It went numb. You could not use that leg anymore, but you limped out of the tomb and into the sunlight. You'd made it. But now what? You looked around. Sand. Endless sand. It had taken you and your mom several hours to get here, and you do not remember which way you came from. You looked out across the sand, and you saw nothing. Nothing but sand and the harsh rays of the sun. You stumbled around, but you collapsed under a palm tree. The first thing you felt when you came to was that you could not breathe. You coughed, and out came a crossbow bolt. It cleared, and you felt cold and sweaty. Your back hurt. These were feelings you did not have mere moments ago. Your chest hurt as if something had stabbed you through the heart and pulled it out. It did it again. You tried to open your eyes, but the brightness was too great, as if someone was shining a light directly into your pupils. You closed them and you yelled. As you did, a voice spoke up. "The light is off now," it spoke. A familiar voice. A voice that you could not place. A female voice. You opened your eyes again, and to your surprise, now you could see. But not in the way you were used to. The entire room was devoid of color, only black with outlines of white. Something that Tarak would recognize as dark vision, but something that you, experiencing these events, were not familiar with. But you could see now. You were laying on a bed, covered in blood and bandages. Around here looked to be a fairly modest shack with cloth covering the windows, only letting the barest trickle of sunlight in. In front of you, you saw but one other person. From a distance, she looked remarkably attractive. A fancy dress came down her entire body, studded with jewels. She had long, slender fingers, each with a different styled gemstone. But underneath all that beauty lay a sinister strength. Hidden under the folds of her clothing, her arms were built like a weightlifter. Next to her lay a massive spear, longer and spikier than anything you'd seen before. It seemed to be a poor implement for actually killing people, but rather intended to prolong the suffering of those once impaled. And her face, the face of this woman was unmistakable. It was older, yes, and perhaps had a different style of makeup since Tarak had last seen her, but the face of a murderer is unmistakable. It was the face of the beast that had jumped out at Tarak in one of his dreams, a dream that was now about to become his nightmare, as the face of Trixie gave a smile towards the defenseless girl. She screamed in terror at the sight of the vampire. Her arms and legs hurt, but she scrambled away. She scrambled so far that she climbed up the walls of the shack. This confused her. Why did you feel stronger? Why did you suddenly possess the ability to stick to walls? You looked at the vampire in front of you, and suddenly things made a lot more sense. You were still afraid, but Trixie looked towards you in pity. You had questions, and she had answers. Reluctantly, you agreed. You spent many hours talking to Trixie. You felt her prey on your feelings. She explained in vivid detail what had happened to you, and helped you remember. You felt taken advantage of at first, but soon you didn't care. This was a new chapter of your life, and you felt a new feeling boiling up inside of you as Trixie continued, as she explained to you the source of your pain. The sun. Sarenrae. You felt cheated. You felt injustice. Sarenrae, the goddess of compassion, of healing, of redemption. Sarenrae had betrayed you and all of her flock. Eventually, you heard the crux of Trixie's plan. Why she had resurrected you. She intended to start a movement. A movement to show the world what Sarenrae really is. The source of all our suffering, and the idol of worship by crazed fanatics. A religion based around lies, deceit, and murder. A religion that proclaims its love of life, and yet threatens to destroy all undead, claiming we are worth less than a dung-farming commoner. A eclipse of the sun, if you will. What say you, Dina? Do you wish to grieve and worry and feel pity on those who showed you no emotion? Or do you wish to turn over a new leaf, explore your new powers to the highest potential, and get the revenge your heart so desperately desires? You stared at the hand of the Blue Witch, the hand of a vampire, of a monster, a hand that stood for anger, hatred, and manipulation, and yet it was an offer of vengeance, an offer of mutual death, an offer of revenge, but also a path to destruction. You knew if you shook that witch's hand that you would be bound by covenant. There would be no rest until she was destroyed utterly, or she took her revenge. You thought back to your final moments alive, your mom's lifeless corpse, a mace covered in blood, a blameless excuse, and the restraint when you wished to escape, the unwillingness to stop when she was too far away, and the pain when they were chasing her, and vaguely heard comments about looting Mom's corpse and finding replacements. You looked back at Trixie's open hand and shook it, sealing the deal. This time you smiled and started the conversation yourself. We've got work to do. Several years passed, and you began your work of infiltrating the clergy of Sarenrae. and work was coming along nicely. You, along with your master, have worked to undermine the clergy of Sarenrae at every turn. You've convinced the high-ranking clerics of Sarenrae's treachery. You've planted false evidence and even turned entire settlements into hotbeds of the eclipse. You hate Sarenrae with every fiber of your being, and you work tirelessly to spread that goal. Your master may be the face of the movement, but you are the practical head. Whenever Trixie gives speeches, you organize the logistics. You take care of all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Running an evil cult is hard work. Thankfully, ever since you became a vampire, sleep has become the least of your concerns. The only thing that keeps you going is a heavy drink of the blood of one of the captured clerics of Sarenrae before you order their execution. And you order a lot of executions. You use your faithful to siphon off the power of Sarenrae herself. You prepare a chamber for this specific purpose. A chamber deep under the sands of Siren where one day your master, Trixie, can use that siphoned divine energy to act as a catalyst for a massive discharge of magic, powerful enough to even destroy Sarenrae, perhaps. Time passed. A lot of time passed, in fact. Centuries passed as you continue your work. Eventually, your work is discovered, however. But you do not worry. Most clergy of Sarenrae have at this point been turned to the eclipse. Civil war engulfs the clergy, but you are confident in your victory. What worries you more is your master, Trixie. She has shown herself less and less to the faithful of the eclipse. This was a problem, given your master was the face of your movement. You do not question this at first. After all, it is not your place to question. But eventually, over time, you work up the courage to ask Trixie what was up. To your surprise, you found her missing. Immediately, you sent your agents on a manhunt. You discover your master almost immediately, but perhaps not in the form you were expecting to find her. You found Trixie in the captivity of a druid, a centaur, and a halfling, a group of Saronites who are now at the forefront of the opposition to crush the eclipse. At first, you worked on a plan to rescue your master, but the more divination spells you used on this group, it was clear that Trixie had delivered herself into their hands willingly. Immediately, you suspected mind control magic. For the next several months, you sent wave after wave of Eclipse troops at these heroes, but the more you tried, the more they seemed determined to stop you. You sent earth elementals, cultists, time elementals, dimensional portals, wizards with machine guns, and even blue-eyed white dragons at them. And while you certainly scored a few victories against them, the three of them recorded victory after victory against you, and soon some of your followers began to desert. You cursed them, these Knights of Dawn, as they destroyed everything you built up, as they tore down your life's work, and eventually they tracked you to Assyrian. You ordered your followers to create a massive undead tidal wave to drown Sothis in bodies, but still it was not enough. The heroes infiltrated your pyramid. They killed your most loyal followers. Soon even your own base was not safe. You sent what remained of your forces against them, and you retreated into the heart of your pyramid. It did not matter if they succeeded, as long as they were delayed, for you had one last trump card up your sleeve, and that was Trixie herself. You had stolen back your master from beneath the noses of the Knights of Dawn, and you had placed her within the divine siphon that you had built. Sure, it took some convincing, and you had to lock Trixie inside the tube unwillingly, but you were sure your master would come to her senses soon. Once you powered up the siphon, the Sarenrae would be no more. But just as you began powering it up, the Knights of Dawn, they ambushed you. You sent your last two dragons against them, and a fierce magical battle ensued. You'd always kept your magical studies up to date. It was a close battle, But the might from the paladin, who was the centaur, was too much for you. She stabbed you with her lance that pierced your stone skin. You were thrown across the room and lay next to the halfling, who aimed holy arrows at you. This was it. You were done for. Your life's work ruined. Yet as the druid moved to destroy the siphon and rescue Trixie, the halfling spoke. He wore no holy symbol of Sarenrae, but he spoke as a true saint. He spoke of compassion, of redemption, of the true tenets of Sarenrae, of how that murder was not the answer, and that rather than kill you, he wished to imprison you. You were far too weak to protest. You and Trixie were captured by the Knights of Dawn and brought back to Stone Shingle Keep. You spoke more with the halfling, and while the centaur stood guard over the two of you at lock and key, the halfling was nice. He brought you fresh blood to drink. He argued for you to be imprisoned rather than killed. And for the first time in perhaps hundreds of years, you shed a tear for his kindness. In the months at Stone Shingle, however, there was only one other person in need of your attention. Your master, Trixie. She refused to drink blood. She preferred a slow death by starvation than continued existence as a captive. As a result, you would often need to force feed Trixie the food she was brought. Often both of your foods. She would occasionally refuse to drink. However, this had the secondary effect of reducing your own blood intake until one day things got pretty woozy.